Alright guys, so I wanted to talk to you guys about visualization. I know everyone is bored out of their minds being at home, not able to train jiu-jitsu. We get so addicted, right, to being in the gym, around our friends, getting the endorphins from rolling around with people. It becomes literally like an addiction, right? So I feel like everyone who loves jiu-jitsu is going through cold turkey now. Like they need to get that workout in, right? That feel-good sensation after practice. And I don't think there's anything that can really replace that, Like when this whole thing started, I'm telling myself, well, I should probably post some videos, engage with people online. I think that's all fun and everything, tons of instructionals out there you can learn from. But I don't think anything replaces actually being on the mats, right? But for those of you who are serious about jiu-jitsu and really want to improve, there's some advice that I can give that I think that this is a good opportunity to actually practice that I think that will help your jiu-jitsu in the long run. One thing is, I've always been a big fan of visualization. I've never liked to drill in the sense where people drill, like just like mindless repetition, I call it. I don't like that because I don't think they're actually getting better by performing a move that is not realistic. The classic example is your opponent lays down or a partner lays down, you put your hand on his or her knees and you just like shuffle your feet around from left to right. I've been training jiu-jitsu for over 20 years. I have never seen anyone pass guard like that. To me, that is pointless drilling. I mean, I respect people who like to practice that way, but I think that you're just frying your nervous system. There might be some cardio benefit. You're warming up, so there's some benefits to that sort of drilling. But I like to kind of drill it the way wrestlers drill, like live with a little resistance, right? You're actually teaching your body how to move the right way. That makes a lot more sense to me. But given that we can't do that now, what are we left with? I think there are many things that we can do as far as improving our jiu-jitsu that have nothing to do with being on the mats. One of them is to think of the mind as a computer. So my consciousness as a programmer, the back of my mind is the software. So I have to be programming the software all the time, every day. You know how people talk about like, oh, I have to tell myself that I'm confident, right? Or I really have to believe that I'm going to win. And you can tell yourself this stuff superficially all day. If you have not assimilated that belief in the back of your mind, right, the software, it's not going to happen. It's easy to say, I'm going to be the best in the world, but if you don't, deep down, you don't believe that, right, it's never going to work. So you have to convince yourself of that. Like, how do you convince yourself that you're actually going to defeat your opponents, that you're going to be great? How do you convince yourself to be confident, just bury that insecurity once and for all? And I actually strongly believe that visualization is the way to do that, because through visualization, you actually start convincing yourself of the things that you want your mind to believe in. I don't believe in like the whole secret thing. I don't think the universe cares two figs about you. I don't think that there's anything extraordinary happening. I think it's just your mind creating patterns, right? You're just creating patterns through consciously focusing and drilling in your mind and repetition in your mind and building that confidence that comes with it. I'll give you an example. And I've always done this instinctively. I would never needed anyone to walk me through this. I've spoke to many sports psychologists in the past, and they suggest this sort of visualization, and it's something that to me always came very easily. People who know me know I have severe ADD. I zone out just like that, right? And I like zoning out because it's like my happy place. It's my way of coping with the world. I've always been that way, and I enjoy that. I like being in my own head, but in my head, I can prepare my mind for it to accomplish the things I want it to accomplish. So the visualization drill, it could be done in the shower, while you're eating, while you're laying in bed. Normally with me, it's been throughout the day, right? But a lot of times before I go to bed, that's when my mind is most active, and sometimes I even have a hard sleep because I remember I visualize jiu-jitsu not as much these days. I'm retired. I don't have any ambition to win a world title. So to me, it's more, I have different focuses, different goals in life now. But when I was competing, sometimes I'd be up at night till 2, 3 in the morning, just visualizing. I'd be winning in my head over and over and over. And I didn't have to force myself to do it because I enjoyed that exercise. The exercise of visualization was so vivid, it was so real, that I felt that I was actually winning a world title every night before I went to bed. So I would see every little detail as vividly as possible. I try to feel the mats. I try to picture the opponent, his corner, my corner. I'd be making weight. And I run my mind through this process very patiently, very slowly, no rush. And I'd see myself always winning, right? And sometimes doubt creeps in. Like, mind is a very difficult thing to control. So, if I ask you not to think of pink elephant, you just thought of pink elephant. You can't stop yourself from doing it. But what you can do is, make sure that your mind is always winning, right? And it's not an easy thing to do, but I believe you can do this. So we tend to get into these negative pathways, right? These negative pathways of someone taking you down, sweeping you, beating you. Your mind doesn't understand the difference between victory and defeat. It's just creating pathways as you think of these things, right? So if you picture yourself being taken down, it's exactly what's going to happen. That used to happen with a student of mine. He would always perform very well in the gym, but never well in tournaments. And when I finally asked him what was happening, he was explaining to me how he always saw himself losing. And I think that had a lot to do with the reason why he was, probably not the only thing, but that was certainly an ingredient in that equation. Why was he losing all the time? It's because he couldn't see himself in a positive light. And that's when I started becoming more aware of this. So what I like to do is I like to see myself winning over and over and over the same situation. I will find what I call no man's land. No man's land where the fight takes place, right? You have your trenches, right? If your opponent beats trench number 1, number 2 is going to fall easier, and so on. When I know where no man's land is, that's where my visualization takes place. What do I mean by that? If I'm fighting a judoka and I can't hang with this guy on my feet, I know I'm going to have to pull guard. And I know how he passes in a certain way because that's what he does every time someone pulls guard on him. So with that being said, I have an idea of where the fight takes place. Of course, as you move up, in your jiu-jitsu journey, it's going to get more and more sophisticated. So you have to be a better strategist in order to understand your tactics, your opponent's tactics, your strengths, your weaknesses, and your opponents. And that way, with all this, all this information, you can discover where no man's land is. Once you know where no man's land is, you can actually start a visualization. So for example, when I was fighting MMA, I knew that the guys would try to stand up with me. So I'd have to picture myself taking my opponent down many, many times. And I'd picture the likely scenarios in a fight, whatever those likely scenarios were. And I'd always be winning in my head. So if he tried to do something he would fail, I would counter and I'd get it. I'd get my sweep, I'd get my takedown. Remember, you're not supposed to go randomly doing this. You're supposed to focus where? In no man's land, where the fight takes place. What is the likely scenario where the fight's going to take place? In BJJ, it's typically guard passing and sweeping, right? That's the middle ground, right? Normally, one's going to be on bottom, the other one on top. They accept that normally. Sometimes they stay standing, depending on the styles. Sometimes they double guard pull, depending on the styles. But these are the no man's land in jiu-jitsu. Standing, double guard pull. If I'm passing, you're sweeping. And that's where the visualization should take place. If you know your opponent, it's always easier to visualize because you can prepare specifically. But it's important that you always win in your mind. Like, you have to see yourself being successful over and over and over. And that's what's going to improve your confidence, because in your mind, you've already won 1,000,000 times. There's no surprise going on. There's nothing new going on. And, there's always a tendency for your mind to go negative, right? It happens all the time. I would say in my head, I'd say the word stop. Whenever I saw myself losing or something bad happening, I'd stop. I would literally think of the word stop, and I'd reset my mind back into a positive pathway. And there's no way out of it unless you're completely enlightened. There's a tendency for your mind to drift back into negative thinking. I have a friend of mine, I have this conversation with, he would say delete. Or, I've had other people say fuck it. And then just they put a stop to that negative process and they restart the process under a positive light. You have to be winning all the time. And when you do this over and over and over and you see yourself on the podium, that's part of visualization. I always would picture myself with my hand raised. I would always picture the gold medal around my neck. I would always picture the podium. And I would do this over and over and over. It almost feels like you belong there. Like second place is not a real place. That place doesn't exist, because in my head, I've won so many times. How could I ever be second? It's impossible, right? That's where the confidence comes from, because you've done it in your head so many times. There is no other place for you to be in. It's not an easy thing to do. I think you get better at it over time. My advice is to enjoy it. To me, it was always easy because I enjoy it. When I'm visualizing, my heart races. I've found myself sweating. I've found myself so far deep the rabbit hole that I was almost crying. I was so excited because I was winning a world title. I was so happy. And and when you snap out of it, it's when you realize, man, I was way out there, because you believe everything that's happening. So I guess a lesson for all practitioners to have is that the mind is a huge place. It's not a small place. I think the the mind is a far more interesting place in the real world, you know. So my advice is to really, dive deep, into your own thoughts. I think this quiet is an opportunity to practice that and a way of improving your jiu-jitsu without really having to be at the gym.